All right, welcome everybody. We'll get started in just a moment. I just want to ensure that everybody's audio is settled in before we start. All right, looks like a pretty good critical mass. So welcome to today's EDGE user group. Before we start off with the updates, I just want to cover a few technical things in case you haven't joined us for one of these before. This platform is Zoom webinar. It's not quite the same as Zoom meeting, although obviously it is very similar in terms of functionality. The big differences are that your cameras and microphones are muted by default. So if you want to interact with the panelists or with other attendees, you'll have to use the chat function and the Q&A function. For chat, you can use that for any kind of discussion, comments for either the panel or for each other. For questions related to the content, we do prefer vastly if you put those in the Q&A, just because it's much easier for us to manage what's been answered already and it progresses a little bit more efficiently. You can ask those questions anonymously, you can view existing ones, and you can upvote them or add your own comments to them for that matter. So without further ado, I want to hand it off to today's moderator, or at least one of them, Julia Finocchi. Julia?
Thank you, Michael. Welcome everyone to the October 2021 EDGE user group meeting, where you'll get an update of what's happening in EDGE and what to expect in the near future. After you hear from us, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions of IESC fellows who are here and about how to best use the resources within EDGE when evaluating international credentials. Next slide. Today's hosts are me, Julia Finocchi, and my colleague, Jasmine Saidi-Kunert, who is the IESC chair and the founder, president, and CEO of ACEI Global Consulting. Jasmine?
Thank you, Julia. Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be with you again today. For our newcomers to the EDGE user group, I'd like to introduce two members of the IESC who are joining me today. We have Emily Tse with the International Education Research Foundation and Robert Watkins with the University of Texas, Austin. And also we have ACRO staff. Of course, we have Julia, who's one of our representatives, our liaison with ACRO. We have Christina Carty and David Mihalyek. So this is a small representation of a very prolific and active group. We're busy individuals. Just to let those of you who are new to this month's EDGE user group, I'd like to give you a brief intro as to who we are. IESC is a representation of experienced professionals who have been in the field of international education, admission, as well as credential evaluations. We are all volunteers. We're doing this because it's a passion for us. And we have been members of the IESC for various number of years. Our representation is from universities as well as private credential evaluation firms. We have each authored country profiles and continue to even contribute to the segments on EDGE, particularly if there are certain newsworthy items that come our way and our members really just dive in, roll up their sleeves and do the additional research to help keep the content robust and active and updated. Just a quick review, let's see. Yes, thank you, the agenda. We have a number of newsworthy items to share with you. We've been very busy updating several countries. This is just a snapshot of some that we had time to address for today's EDGE user group. My colleague Robert will be giving you an update on Ethiopia as well as the West African secondary school certificate exam grading scales for the various countries in that region. And then we will have Emily give us an update on the Sierra Leone, Scotland, and Hong Kong, the various credentials that you see. Following that, we will provide you with an update on the Offshore Caribbean Medical School report that was prepared by our fellows, which were 2 individuals who were selected to be fellows of the IESC. And that's Rosalie and Loida. Their presentation is now prepared in this report. And if you had a chance to hear their webinar presentation about a week ago, I think you would have a great idea as what a tremendous job they've done for us as fellows for the IESC. Then we'll give you an update on the upcoming BadenWrttemberg Seminar and the additional webinars that are coming up through ACRA. And of course, we'll wrap it up with our wonderful Q&A, where there's always great issues that are presented to us. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Oh, this is it. Yes, the poll. We like to take this poll at the beginning of all of our EDGE user meetings, and this is just for us to kind of gauge the temperature as to where everybody is from today. So if you could please take your just a second and look at the questions. I will read them out loud for recording. Identify the segment that you represent. You're an institutional staff member or representing an evaluation service or government or a law firm. And the next question is this your first user group? And the third question is, are you an EDGE subscriber? And we'll give you about 15 seconds to complete this poll. Okay, here are the results. Well, very nice. We have a good percentage that are institutional staff representations, and followed by our colleagues at evaluation services, and a small percentage from government representation, and I guess none today from law firms. And in terms of our second question, we have quite a lot of new first-time users. So thank you, welcome. Really great to have you on board. And that's it. Well, thank you. Welcome, everybody. So let's start with our agenda. So let's turn the microphone over to Robert, who will take us through Journey to Africa to Ethiopia.
Thanks,
Robert?
Jasmine. Yes, this is one of the things that came up. Well, I'll tell you who it was. It was Carolyn Christie of FCE, a credential service, Foreign Credential Evaluations, who received a leaving certificate exam from Ethiopia that was dated this year, and then sent it to me and said, this isn't what's an EDGE. And it's not that nothing that you say in EDGE is on here. And so that began the research digging, and what it finally led to, and then there was the really great part was I was not able to ultimately find the true answer until about 2 or 3 weeks ago, when I suddenly stumbled across an announcement from government body in Ethiopia. So we were able to finally get it into EDGE. We're not completely done with that yet. So there's still going to be some changes probably that you'll see, but from what you might literally be looking at now if you've got EDGE up. But let me highlight what it is that, that we discovered. First of all, in going into to make the determination of this new credential, which is actually the third bullet you see there, the SSLE, the Secondary School Leaving Exam, I noticed that there were some other things that could be helpful in there if we went ahead and adjusted those slightly. For example, the first bullet, the Ethiopian General Secondary Education Certificate may also appear in acronym form on some documentation as the EGSECE. that additional E standing for examination. So, I know that while most of you guys are fabulous credential evaluators and can analyze something and figure things out, sometimes it's helpful if we go ahead and spell it out literally for you. So we've got in there the fact that the EGSEC may appear on your documentation as EGSECE. Fairly minor change, but something we needed to put in there. The other noteworthy thing is that the certificate that they gave at the end of 12th grade prior to 2000, which by the way was the only credential, unlike nowadays, there wasn't a 10th grade credential. It was called the Ethiopian School Leaving Certificate Exam, and it was awarded through the year of 2000. We've got that in there too, so you can see that as well. And then the new credentials being, of course, the Ethiopian the first bullet, EGSEC, which is the 10th grade certificate. And then finally, what they got after 12th instead of the second bullet, they subsequently got from 2000, 2001 forward was the Ethiopian Higher Education Entrance Exam. Also, it can appear as Ethiopian University Entrance Examination Certificate. I've got resource material that tells me EHEEE went away and was replaced by EUEEC, but I've also seen some things, I think Emily's come up with some things that show that may not necessarily be true, or put it another way, the transition may have been very ragged and staggered. So it's best that in EDGE Ethiopia, we give you both of those acronyms so you know that either one is the same thing, that's that 12th grade leaving certificate for the last 20 years. Then the thing that prompted all of this, Carolyn's credential that she came up with, the SSLE, it seems that in August of 2021, yes, just a few months ago, the National Educational Assessment and Examination Agency, the NEA, an arm of the government, announced that from that moment forward, and I don't know that it was in August, I'm pretty sure it was before that because I believe Carolyn's credential was dated a couple of months before that, but they were finally announcing in August that they had made this change. After 20 years that they had changed, and they no longer were using EHEEE or EUEEC. They were in fact using Secondary School Leaving Examination, SSLE, as of 2021. So we have that now in EDGE Ethiopia. Jasmine, I'll hand it back to you then.
Thank you, Robert. Well,
you want me to go ahead then?
Yes, this is the continuation in our journey through Africa.
Sure.
There you go.
Yeah, staying in Africa, but hopping over to the other side of the continent. One of the things we noticed, and I think I've said this before in presentations, EDGE was rolled out rapidly in the middle of the first decade of the century. We missed some things, grading scales particularly. And so we've really depended on EDGE users to alert us to things that we missed or that we got wrong, or even new things that have come in, like that thing that Carolyn found last there in Ethiopia, the SSLE. In this particular instance in West Africa, we were somewhat embarrassed to see that we did not have in the West African countries, and there are 5 of them that cooperate through WIAC, the West African Examinations Council, to use the West African Senior School Certificate Exam, WASSCE, and that it has a grading scale that's alphanumeric, and we didn't have that in EDGE. So we began the research, and what turned out to be, we thought, straightforward and simple, turned out to have some minor complications to it. First off, identifying the countries, and there are 5. You see them there at the top: Gambia, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Ghana, and Liberia. And in each instance in EDGE, we had the old Senior School Certificate Exam grading scale, which it just so happens was also 1 through 9, but it did not have letters associated with it. The new WASSCE that WAC came up with did use an alphanumeric scale. So we needed to get that into each of the 5 country entries, and we did. And while we were at it, discovered that there was different years of implementation among the 5 countries. And you can see them there in that first bullet, the different years. Gambia was first, and Liberia was last. And so they were using their old one right up until the date of implementation you see there. And okay, so we got all that figured out. Then it turned out that I composed a blurb for each of these entries in the grading scales to show that this was the new certificate, the WASSCE, that was used as of, and we gave the dates that were individual for each country, and that it replaces the one used before that. And of course, we had to keep that in EDGE. We couldn't get rid of it because you might get an old credential that would use that old scale and that old certificate. So we held on to that. And my blurb said that prior to the dates of implementation listed above, the countries used for their senior secondary certificates a 1 through 9 numerical scale only. And then Emily finds out, does some research and finds out that, oh my gosh, Ghana had not used a numeric 1 through 9 scale. They'd used something entirely different. So I had to recompose the blurb to say that prior to implementation of WASSCE, the countries used a 1 through 9 scale, except for Ghana, which used a letter grade scale. Finally, we were able to put all that into EDGE. It will be the first scale you see. The second scale will be the older scale that was used in the prior certificate. And of course, the dates are germane to each of the individual countries. So the Gambia scale will say prior to 1998, Nigeria will say prior to 1999, and so forth. So the lesson here, though, is do not hesitate to send in a question, query, or comment when you discover a different grading scale or something like that that doesn't seem to match up with what you see in EDGE. And we'll get right on it, digging and trying to find out what exactly happened, and more importantly, when it happened. And with that, Jasmine, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you so much, Robert. And just to continue with what Robert just suggested, is that if you have questions regarding a credential, we'd really appreciate if you could also provide us with a copy of that credential or grading scale on a transcript. Of course, make sure that you redact all the sensitive private information relevant to the students who are presenting the document. But the more information you can provide us, the easier it is for us to continue with the research. So we are not kind of reinventing the wheel on some of this, but your input is so much appreciated because much of EDGE relies on the feedback we receive from the users. Thank you. I'm now going to invite Emily to continue the updates on several countries she's been working on. Sierra Leone is the first. Go ahead, Emily.
Hi, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. So we're going to stay in West Africa, but look specifically at the country of Sierra Leone, the Higher National Diploma. The HND is actually a 3-year technical qualification after the high school credential, again, the West African Senior School Certificate Examination. And for ordinary national diploma holders, they are able to get advanced standing and just complete the 3rd and last year of the HND. But overall, it does represent 3 years of university level study. It's offered at a wide range of institutions in Sierra Leone, including Yala University, polytechnics, and technical colleges. Because it does focus on applied areas of study, common majors include agriculture and forestry, health sciences, and business. Although it is comparable to 3 years of university study, course-by-course review is recommended for the termination of transfer credit. So that's it for Sierra Leone. On to the next slide. which lands us in Scotland. We also updated the teaching qualifications in the profile for Scotland. In order to become a teacher there, there are two main routes, the 4-year Bachelor of Education or the 1-year Professional Graduate Diploma in Education, the PGDE. The PGDE is a 1-year program again, which follows the bachelor's degree, specifically a 4-year Bachelor Honors. Now, it is considered to be a post-baccalaureate credential, meaning it's an additional year of undergraduate study rather than graduate. Why do we say that? Because it doesn't represent necessarily advanced study that builds on an existing body of knowledge. Rather, it builds on knowledge. Well, it's for bachelor's degree holders in a different field, in a non-education field. For that reason, it's considered comparable to 1 year of additional undergraduate study. The Bachelor of Education and the PGDE prepares primary and secondary school teachers. The PGDE was previously the Postgraduate Certificate of Education, thus the update in EDGE. The PGCE actually still remains in the rest of the UK, but Scotland, being different, now has the Professional Graduate Diploma in Education. Okay, on to the next slide. And then staying in Scotland, we also updated the Postgraduate Certificate and Diploma. No, you're not experiencing deja vu. Not too long ago, we did updates on the Graduate Certificate and Diploma, which were considered short credentials at the undergraduate level. But now we have the Postgraduate Certificate and Diploma. These follow the 4-year Bachelor Honors degree and is pegged at the Scottish Scottish Credit and Qualification Framework Level 11, which is the master's degree level, so that's graduate level study. The Postgraduate Certificate and Diploma represent 1 semester of study and 1 year of study, respectively. And again, we would regard that as equivalent to graduate level credit. And then on to the next slide, Hong Kong. For Hong Kong, we updated the bachelor's degree entry and then separated out a distinct entry of its own for the Bachelor of Engineering. And the reason why we had to update Hong Kong was because there were educational reforms that took place within the last decade. Previously, the educational structure was patterned after the British educational system, where you saw 13 years of primary and secondary education, followed by a 3-year bachelor's degree. So previously, in Hong Kong, their bachelor's degrees were 3 years following the Hong Kong A-level examinations. But those have been phased out. And now what you have is the 12-year Hong Kong Diploma of Secondary Education, or the HKDSE, and the bachelor's degrees, both the regular bachelor in the arts, sciences, and social sciences, and the Bachelor of Engineering. They're both 4 years following the HKDSE. So we have made those updates to reflect these changes, as well as updates in the overview section of the Hong Kong profile. We are now working on the law degree, so that should be coming up soon. And that's it for Hong Kong.
Thank you so much, Emily, on all the updates. I'm seeing quite a few questions relevant to some of the topics we've just talked, but we will wait until we wrap up this segment and we will dive into the question from our audience. So the next item is submitting credential suggestions to the IASC. Is this something, Christina or Julia, would either one of you wish to talk about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I can
Thank
cover
you.
it. Hi, everyone. As Robert stated, so many of our content updates, such as the ones that we just went over, originate from credential suggestions made by our subscribers like you. So thank you again. There are so many ways to submit credential suggestions, especially as you're looking through on EDGE. You can use our request and update form, which is available on all country pages. So as you're sifting through those different credentials, if you find one that needs an update, you can submit it directly from the page itself. We did receive a question that I saw asking us if our contact us or request an update forms would in the future include a space for attachments. And we're working right now with IT, but you can also email us, which might be the best option because we do ask that you guys can provide as much existing research on the subject as possible, which oftentimes does include those PDF samples. And to reiterate what Jasmine said, when sending in those sample documents, please include the front and the back and ensure that you are redacting any personal information, especially the names, date of birth, any identification numbers. Other research or context to provide can include whether or not it's issued by recognized institutions, and please list and link them as you can. Also, any minimum entrance requirements, the duration and description of the program and what it leads to, whether that's further education or certificate or employment. And our email is right on that slide. It's edge@acro.org.
Thank you so much, Christina. Our next item is Julia. She will be giving us an update on the upcoming events that ACRO has on the calendar for us.
Yes, thank you, Jasmine. So this first slide is about the Offshore Medical School report, which was just released. And if any of you were lucky enough to join us just a week ago, we had Rosalie Hancock and Loida Gonzalez-Utley present on the research that they did that made up this report. It was really comprehensive and just very good information for us. I encourage you to go. You can watch the video recording of it on our YouTube channel, or you can access this report on our website, which you will see that website address come up in a little bit. Just really a good, needed resource for us, and I encourage you to take a look at it. Next slide. Also, just wanted to give you an alert. The application period has closed, but that we are holding our 2021 Baden-Württemberg Seminar next week, next Wednesday. And this is virtual this year, as I said, because of COVID and things. But next year, the Germans are very excited to offer this seminar in person, which means a trip to the Baden-Württemberg region, where you really get to learn about the German education systems, about the types of institutions in Germany, and the comparability between the two, and also about exchange and developing exchanges with German institutions. This is an ACRO and NAFSA effort. We do the administrative work on this, and we have an application window. I do know that that application window for next year will open in the spring. So I would encourage you to think about doing this. The only thing that participants have to do is cover their airfare from and to country. So other than that, everything else is covered by the German ministry, the Baden-Württemberg ministry. Next slide. Also, we are continuing our Countries in Crisis series. We did do a coffee break, and we are doing a few webinars, and the first two are scheduled. They are free. They address Lebanon in November 3rd, Wednesday. So that'll be an overview of the education system and really an update on what's currently going on the ground in Lebanon. And then we'll follow that up in December with another webinar on Afghanistan, and then we expect to have one more webinar in the new year. Sadly, crises will continue, and we will continue to watch them and try to keep you as up to date as we possibly can on what's going on best practices, and on how we can assist students from those systems when they are in crisis. All right, let's turn it over to the Q&A. Jasmine?
Thank you, Julia. Yes, here's the moment where we see your concerns, questions, and if we are able to respond, we will. And if not, this is the homework that you give us for the IASC to go back and to take a deeper dive. Okay, so let's look at the first question here. our attendees asking, is there a new grading scale for the newly renamed Ethiopian Secondary School Leaving Exam, or is it the same as the previous one, the EUEEC? Robert, would you like to tackle that?
Yeah, sure. That's a simple one, Jasmine. It did not change. Only the name changed. The grading remained the same. Indeed, I think the exams that they have to take that are compulsory or like they all remain the same. It was simply a change of the title. I think they wanted, here's Robert guessing here, but my suspicion is that they wanted it to sound more definitive as a leaving certificate than simply an admission to university after that. It's the old joke that I always tell about the SAT is it a entrance exam or is it a leaving exam? Or the baccalaureate in France is a prime example of this, baccalaureate. And I'll say yes. So what they were doing here was simply to change the name, nothing else of content.
Nothing else of content. Yeah, thank you. The system has been just changing the names quite frequently over the, I guess, 2 decades, correct? It's been kind of a fun puzzle for us to put together. Would you like to take
exactly, Jasmine, exactly why we're not done with Ethiopia.
We're not done, correct. There is a query here about Hong Kong as to the ladder and if that's going to be updated. I have to be very honest, the ladders are one of the issues that we are trying to address. We have looked into revising the format of the ladders, a whole new design, and this is a work in progress. So I'm afraid to just confess to you that no, the ladders have not been updated. This is something that the IAC would need to review and consider what is the next best approach to addressing the ladders, not just for Hong Kong, but pretty much all the countries. We're looking into making the appearance of all the ladders uniform according to a new design. So the content of all of the countries would also be updated, but it's a work in progress. So be patient with us, please. Thank you. Let's see. Another question here has to do with...
There's a follow-up Ethiopia question.
Yeah,
Jasmine.
I saw that too, right. So let's look at this one again about, it says, EDGE indicates that the EHEEE was awarded between 2003 and 2010, and the EUEE from 2010 to 2020. The lowest passing grade for the EUEE is 50%. And for the previous one, the EHEEE is 25%. I'm seeing new verified SSLE with very low percentage grades. Just want to ensure I'm assessing these fairly.
I'm still muted, sorry. I'll come, let me just say that, I'll be honest, we were looking more at dates of implementation, names, and I didn't really look closely at grading that was done there beyond that it looked to be the same. By grading, I mean what was passing and what was not passing. So what this question raises is that the idea that while we think we're done with Ethiopia, and I'm still changing, like I just said a moment ago, I'm still changing some things in EDGE Ethiopia, it would behoove us to at least go in and try to find out is pass rating, the pass rates changing, even if they keep the scale the same, is pass rates changing? Are they changing? And then if so, was that immediate implementation? That would be my assumption, but we don't know. So I will look and dig into that a little deeper. I really didn't spend a lot of time with how they were assessing the results. So I'll go in and do just that. And we'll probably, something like that would be like a blurb in the grading box that we've introduced that would say, prior to this time, while it was still the EE and so on, here was the passing rate. Now under the SSLE new name, it is, as of August 2021, it is this rate. So we'll get on that and work on that.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, I'm putting that back on the agenda as it concerns the grades.
Jasmine, one of the things, the other piece of that question was the difference between the use of the acronym for that now changed certificate, which is EEUEE or EUEE or EHEEE, and that's correct. We thought that was the clear break, that it was a passover from Ethiopian higher education entrance exam up to 2010, and then suddenly becomes EUEE. But we saw some after that date that appeared to be using the old acronym. So what we do in cases like that, well, first of all, one is to see if we can really drill down and find out if indeed there was a change. Was it night and day, or more likely staggered? If it continued on well beyond 2010, then we have to rethink use of that date altogether. That in fact, it's more like 2003 to, we could say something like 2003 to 2010, whereupon the use of the acronym Ethiopian University Entrance Exam began to be used, but interchangeably with the old acronym up to a point, and so we'll look into that as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm noting that on the list for our next agenda. There is a question here from one of our attendees. I think, Julia, I'm going to allow you to address. This has to do with proprietary privacy standards for the how much information someone can borrow from the Acro Edge in terms of copyright. The questionnaire is, when using Acro Edge scales in our evals and including them in my evaluation, should I also have the following text included? And it's the kind of the legal language about the usage of the Edge country profile.
Right. And so Nicholas goes into great depth here about, should he say that his college is a paid subscriber to the Acro electronic database for global education and is sharing this information as a reference to an evaluation, other use is strictly prohibited. And then he goes on to give some more information about Acro Edge. Nicholas, I think for anybody that citing that you're using the Acro electronic database for global education, Edge, is sufficient. Like if you cite our Acro Edge, that's sufficient. You're citing the publication that you got it from. And I think the idea that it's a reference or a resource in your evaluation implies that's how you're using the information. So I think that's sufficient. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on that, but I think that should, yes, I think the link into Acro Edge is sufficient. If they go there and they don't have a subscription, they are not going to be able to access the rest of it. So it's just as you would access any website and include that link as a reference. I think that's exactly what you need to do. And I don't think you need to add all the rest of it to the evaluation.
Thank you, Julia.
You're welcome.
There was a question, yes, that I first saw in chat. Now it's in our Q&A. This has to do with the Nigerian high school grading scale. Beth is asking, she says, we have a student from Nigeria whose high school has a grading scale that I cannot find anywhere else, and that makes no sense to me. And she gives an example, A1 equals 80 plus to 100, B2 equals 70 to 74, and so on. There's no letter score for 75 to 79. Robert, would you like to tackle that?
I would have to see it, obviously, and I have to see whether they're dealing with a school transcript or the actual WASSCE document.
Correct.
To see, because it's WASSCE that created the grading scale for the West African senior school certificate exam. So that's one thing. If it's being reproduced by an institution, a school, then and they're leaving out a subsection like 75 to 79, I think is what I heard, then it sounds to me like there's been a printing error, that they've left out a portion of it. We don't include ranges in Edge West Africa, which is to say the 5 countries. And certainly I know the universities in Nigeria traditionally do that. And it's possible that the high schools have interpreted the WASSCE grading with ranges as well. But that would be probably germane to the school. Certainly WASSCE does not include percentages on their examination documents. Right. And it's up to you, and it's institutional policy, of course, as to what you want to use when you make your admission decisions. I know at UT Austin, what I do is if I've got a country where there's a national leaving exam, like in Anglophone countries, like in Francophone countries, then my feeling is, and then certainly this is what I teach with some of my colleagues at ACRO's Summer and Winter Institutes as best practice, would be to default to the examination. It's an exam-based system. Therefore, the examination should push aside any internal grading that's going on with respect to the school itself, because that's the nature of the educational system. The United States, of course, is not that way. We're collecting units to graduate our students, and so individual yearly, semesterly grades are important to that process. Whereas in Francophone and Anglophone countries, that's just simply not the case. It all comes down to the exam. So like in France, for example, if you don't take, which is hard to believe, but if you don't pass the baccalaureate, then all you can get to show you're done with high school is a certificat de fin d'études, a certificate of completion studies, and that's it. And most of us will not accept that as equivalent to US senior high school graduation. So because the baccalaureate is such an integral part of the transition process in this educational system. So I guess I would conclude simply by saying, be careful of what you see on school transcripts, even when they attempt to reproduce a national certificate exam onto their transcript or onto their document that they've produced. Let me use an example, finally. The SAT. When we make admission decisions at UT Austin using the SAT, we want the College Board to have sent us that score. I know that Westlake High School here in Austin, Texas, will give me the strip results from that SAT on their transcript, but I don't care. That student has not completed their file by sending me an official score from College Board. So that's the kind of analogy I would use with respect to what I think I'm hearing with respect to this Nigerian situation.
It's a really helpful response, and I hope Beth was of assistance for you. Beth does say that this is a school transcript.
Okay.
And again, I echo what Robert said. If the education system, let's say if we're looking at a secondary system, is intended to prepare the student for final exams that are administered externally by national boards, it's the results that appear on the final examination certificate of that examination board that plays a big part in determining the educational attainment of the student, not the school transcripts. The school transcripts play a secondary role or even a tertiary role. They don't have an impact on the person's admission to a university in that country. So for example, in Nigeria, it would be the student's performance on the West African Examination Council certificates that play a big part. And for us, for evaluation, that's the document that we look at if we're trying to assess if this person has US comparability to senior high school completion. All right.
And there was a follow-up there, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
I'm not sure if it was seen, but she said the issue there is that the student attended 3 years in Nigeria and then finished out as a senior in the USA. So I'm not sure if that affects I guess, the answer at all.
I've seen that. I've seen students who have completed what we even consider to be high school completion, senior high school graduation, yet when they are here in the United States, they may not have their credentials properly evaluated or assessed, and they approach a U.S. senior high school and then they're placed in the senior year. That doesn't mean as far as we're concerned, if they have a WIAC and they've passed the exams and they have satisfactory grades, 4 or 5 subjects and beyond, that's sufficient, in our opinion, to be senior high school.
Jasmine, let me
Please
tackle what Mike read for us. Okay, the beautiful thing about rules is there's always an exception.
Right.
and so what Robert just stated about best practice, there is a King's X to that. If somebody starts a system and then does not conclude that system, but jumps to another, then you sort of have to look at it differently. And I see this happen all the time. To the questioner who brought this up, I see this happen all the time with athletes. And as you can imagine, at UT Austin, we get more than a few of those. And so what generally happens, these are in fact, the NCAA has a term for it. It's called splits. That means they split the systems that they're attending. They start in one, it could be American, it could be another, and they end up in another one. It could be American, it could be another. And so what you have to do is to use the approach that you would use for the final resolving or resolution high school situation. So if they got a high school diploma from the United States, as it sounded like was the case here, then suddenly you're no longer thinking exam-based, you're thinking an accumulation of units. And in fact, just to throw this out there, but things have changed significantly in the 10 years since I chaired the NCAA International Student Records Committee. They moved away from using the exams, the national exams to determine freshman eligibility, to a more American-like model of collecting units, 16 core academic units, evenly distributed among certain subjects such as English or native language, science, social science, etc. So what you have to do in a case like that is you suddenly have to look at those Nigerian grades now as something a little more important than they would have been had the individual stayed in that educational system. Now you're suddenly being forced to look at those as important grades and start to run your GPA, first a Nigerian one, then the final US one, and then sort of try to put that together. If it's an athlete, you need to count the units from Nigeria and the United States according to eligibility center rules on how to count units and so forth. So hopefully that helped a little bit.
We also had, this is Julia, we had a comment, a question in the chat, which was really more of an observation that said, you use the result checker for WIAC, for the WAEC, the West African Examination Certificate. It can legitimize the submission. And I think I speak for everybody when I say, not only is that a best practice, it's an essential practice.
Yes.
Also, Julia, I see that Nicholas has asked another question regarding Navtab and WASSCE evaluating the same way. And I guess the response to that is multifaceted. And so by that, I mean, clearly the WASSCE is an academic pathway educational experience. It is designed to lead to university, okay? Navtab, on the other hand, is designed for an entirely different concept. And that's the idea that someone can complete their education and enter the workforce. And so that would be, so that the subject matter is often quite different. Certainly the outcomes are different. And then the receiver, now Nicholas and I are different. I'll be worried about freshman admission for UT Austin, whereas Nicholas is just trying to do an evaluation for multi-purposes. It could be for school, it could be for something else, getting a job or something. And so there it might be that he would want to look at it a little bit differently. I might be less inclined to admit the Navtab product than the WASSCE product because of the nature of what that person wants with me. Finally, I would just say it would be useful to go in and look at the content of the information in the two experiences to see if I want to personally use that scale somewhat differently for each of the two different entities. In other words, might I might I look at it one way? If it's academic WASSCE, might I be harsher or less harsh if it's Navtab, more applied kinds of subject matter? So that's another way of looking at it. I don't know that I've helped much here, but the point is that they're two so very different things, you probably do need to approach them differently.
Robert, Nicholas does add that he represents a small liberal arts college.
Oh, okay.
And his concern is that they don't want to admit someone who may not be university ready. So that was...
In that case, Nicholas and I are on the same page.
Very much so. Well, thank you so much for everyone's questions. Really appreciate this. And thank you to Robert and Emily and Julia and Christina for your help in responding. Our next item on today's agenda is some just how to stay informed with ACRO. Julia, would you like to?
Yes, we'd like you to stay informed. We'd like to keep so much of what you share with us helps form what we do, how we do it, and that we can give back to you as useful information for you to do your job. So we encourage you to join the EDGE mailing list. We encourage you to subscribe to the ACRO Connect newsletter. And that last item, the International Activities Listserv, if you go to the next slide, Michael, you'll see this tells you exactly how you can connect to the International Activities Listserv. And actually, we've moved this over to a Google group in order to, for technical reasons, to improve the deliverability and the searchability for users. So any questions, go ahead and go into the international activities and subscribe at acro.org. And if you have any questions regarding EDGE, you can always write to edge@acro.org. As far as the IESC goes, once again, a lot of their work is formed by what you come to them about. So in each of the ACRO EDGE pages, you will see the Contact Us button, and you need to go there and let them know how they might, what you might have in mind and how you might help them. And I see Susan just asked a question about how to get involved with the Countries in Crisis webinar. Susan, you can certainly, if it's just registering, you'll find those on our website. But if you'd like to know more about that, feel free to just write to me, Funaki J, F-U-N-A-K-I-J, so my last name, the first initial, at acro.org, and I'd be happy to go into that further with you.
Okay, thank you so much, Julia. And let's move on to our next slide. And this is a wonderful program that we offer through ACRO and the IESC. It's the Gloria Nathanson Fund for International Education. If you have a research concept in mind and you need our support, this is a great way to tap into that. There's funding available up to $1,000 that will support any extra expenses that are needed for you to finalize your research. And we're looking at topics that are related to a country profile, the education system, or some substantive updates on a country that will complement the EDGE country profile. And it will also lead to a white paper on the subject that you are interested in conducting this research. So please take advantage of this opportunity and apply, and hopefully you'll be selected. Thank you. All right, and our next item.
With those.
Something is going on. Well, while we're without a slide, I just wanted to give another shout out for a great publication that ACRO put out, I think it was earlier this year. It was the Guide to Bogus Institutions and Documents. I love to plug this because it's, if you're in credential evaluations, you're always on guard about catching diploma mills or fraudulent records, accreditation mills. And this is a great book brought together by several incredible people in the field who have helped us catch fraud and be aware of the existence of diploma mills. So make sure you get a copy of this. It's available through the ACRO publications page. Thank you. So we're pretty much at the end of today's presentation. Are there any other questions, any burning issues you want to bring up to our attention? We have a few minutes left before we wrap up.
And I put it in the chat as well, but the link to the PDF of the slide deck is available to download there as well.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you. Very well. Well, thank you for everyone's participation today. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for supporting EDGE. And just remember to register for next month, which would be November. Is it November 18th? Yes, same time. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.